Well, good evening, folks. I hope you can hear me, and I'm sure our tech guys look. Just take a look over there. Look at all that wires. It blows my mind what it takes to put this together, and I really appreciate these guys. So let's give them a round of applause. So here we are. Big shout out to Rep Ham and for helping to facilitate this and making sure we had a good facility. I understand there's also a big event locally, local government, a couple issues tonight that we're competing with. And so that everybody knows, we are streaming live, and then we have record of this, and anybody who wants any of that information can easily get it. Just to give also a little bit of a shout out, Executive Director Griffin Caruso has provided a whole bunch of handouts in the back if you haven't seen them, and thank you for that. And I want to welcome Representative Ham, and if you have anything to say, and please do it now.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I understand there are a few things going on in the area. A big zoning hearing board meeting tonight out in Muncie Creek Township, and so we got some phone calls from folks who wanted to be here but had committed to being there for that hearing, and so we appreciate Chairman Dave Maloney coming up here to Lycoming County. Chairman Maloney chairs the Game and Fisheries Committee in Harrisburg in the House. He's our Republican chairman. He's from Berks County. And Chairman Maloney has been leading the charge for sportsmen across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and making sure that your voice is heard. And so what he's doing now is doing a listening tour all the way all over across the Commonwealth. He wants to hear directly from sportsmen. What are your concerns? Whether that's with Fish and Boat, whether it's with Game Commission, whether you have praises for them, whatever it is, we want to hear it so that we can make sure that we are supporting sportsmen in Harrisburg. And so tonight, the chairman is here to hear directly from you, and he wants to hear your voice. He wants to take that voice to Harrisburg, and I appreciate Chairman Maloney coming to Lycoming County. So thank you.
Thank you for that, and we have an extensive, I think, a very, very informative, something you've probably never seen before or had the opportunity before. But before we get started, I'm going to ask Rep Ham to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Thank you kindly. And what we're going to do is we'll let Griffin go right into some of the things we did in the past, and be prepared for me to sort of interrupt, add some things, and cause maybe a little bit more discussion with respect to some of the topics. And we'll get started. Thanks. Go ahead, Griffin.
Thank you, Chairman. So to begin, our agenda for the day is as follows. We're going to get everyone on the same page. What is the Game Commission and what is the Fish and Boat Commission? Followed by who are the commissioners of both commission. Then we're going to get into some CWD, chronic wasting disease concerns that the chairman would like to discuss, followed by open conversation. So let's begin. What is the Game Commission? Well, the Game Commission was started in 1895 to protect and conserve wildlife. It was not started to encourage hunting. You didn't need to encourage hunting in 1895. That's more of its modern role. Their mission, in their own words, is to manage and protect wildlife and their habitats while promoting hunting and trapping for current and future generations. Their key functions are wildlife management, the managing of our game population and their habitat, law enforcement, ensuring people have licenses, there's no poaching, what have you, and public engagement, encouraging hunting, informing people. Their director is Stephen Smith, and he's been in the role for about a year now. The Fish and Boat Commission. They were established back in 1866, initially just to grow the shad population, but the responsibilities have grown significantly over time. In their own words, they protect, conserve, and enhance the Commonwealth's aquatic resources and provide fishing and boating opportunities. Their key functions are regulation and enforcement of fishing and boating laws, education and outreach of fishing and boating, and resource management, ensuring that our waters are stocked with fish, that we have boat launches, and all the necessary equipment. Their director is Tim Schaefer. Both commissions are funded with your money from the sportsmen, from boaters, fishers, hunters. They are outside the realm of most government agencies. They are commissions, not like the Department of Environmental Protection and the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. These are commissions, they're separate. And in being separate, they're largely independent. They make their own regulations, largely outside the realm of the common regulatory process. With that being said, they are still guided by law, specifically two titles, Title 34, Game, and Title 30, Fish.
I want to interrupt a little bit there. Sometimes this helps your thought process of when you see something or maybe hear something put in a different way, you might start asking questions. So something that I would have and still defend the commissions today with respect to the independency of it and the fact that it should be to serve the sportsmen primarily. And I want you to think about something very sort of current. So because the Fish and Boat Commissions are independent, and as I have stated in the past, and I have challenged either the governor's office or one of the commission's offices through questions or right to knows, this is what I will get. They are an independent agency. We do not have any oversight over them. Now, I don't want you to forget that. So then, like recently, when I would challenge the governor's office on something that he was doing, for instance, he put out an executive order that all agencies, including those two which are independent, after he admitted that they're independent, would run their websites through pa.gov. Well, if you're independent, why would you change something that is in your purview and something in your responsibility, which they've done? Want to know what I heard again this week? Well, I went on the website. Boy, that's not like it used to be. Sure is difficult to navigate. I see heads bobbing up and down. That is an exact example to me as to why government in this form gets in the way and it's no longer even accessible. It becomes more potholes and hurdles. So I think that's important to understand that some of the frustration that happens out there is sort of without explanation. So I thought that would be worthwhile breaking away from onto. So go ahead, Griff.
Thank you, Chairman. And I mentioned that the commissions are both guided by law, but the law sets the boundaries and the regulations are specific. Regulations don't come from the chairman or the Senate. That comes from the commission and the commissioners. So now, who are the commissioners? The commissioners are appointees. They are suggested by the Governor's Advisory Council. Who is this council? We don't really know. We used to know all of their names, exactly how many members there were. Under Governor Shapiro, he took all that information away from us. We don't know who these people are.
So I will jump in there again. I actually don't have that paper in front of me. Charlie, if you're here, you probably have that. But anyway, what I wanted to get at is it took me a right to know to ask what and who would be on that Governor's Advisory Council. And I have those names, and some of those people's names you would maybe recognize, maybe not. And you probably would have a lot of questions as to why they are the Governor's Advisory Council. I do. I think it's non-transparent, if you will, that you would block them. The governor also shut them down on their website. They run out of the DCNR building. They have an executive director who makes about $115,000 a year plus benefits and pension. And that individual does whatever he wants. There is no oversight. There is no questioning of it. And whomever these individuals are on the advisory council and whatever conversations they have with them, basically, we don't know. The people who they're to be serving don't know. Yes, sir. 15, yeah. No. So that's the director. That's the director. So he basically works under the DCNR, and that's where his job description will come out of. But all the council members are volunteer, and or whatever they do, well, that's exactly right. They're appointed really through the governor's office. Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And since you brought that up and I allowed this to sort of interrupt, I just want you to understand something. All the commissioners, which is going to be touched on, we might as well do it now. All of the fish and boat and game commissioners specifically, are sort of a behind-the-scenes suggested appointee. And what happens is, whether it be through a House member or a Senate member or just somebody else, they go into the Governor's Advisory Council and that name pops up, or several names. And whatever they do behind closed doors, what comes out is an appointee. It's just like the commissioners. I said this before another meeting. It got quite a bit of laugh, but at the end of the day, it's pretty embarrassing. Under Governor Wolf, at least one individual is on the board today because his wife and Governor Wolf's wife's wife played pinochle together. That's a fact. That's not sportsman history or accomplishments. So to your point, yes, it's one guy once before, it was his insurance agent. So the terms changed. We're gonna get into that. We did try to adjust that a little bit. But I believe one of the reasons that these questions are coming up now, like they have been in the past, is why. And so I will get on to the fact that I have proposed a piece of legislation, not give it to anybody in their name. Rep. Ham wanted it, whomever. My point is, I believe us as sportsmen should be electing those commissioners in our district. Without a doubt, we should have a voice. Every person who has some sort of input on this is elected, but not the commissioners. Okay? So just keep that in your mind for a little bit as we go forward.
So back to what is a commissioner. They're an appointee suggested by the Governor's Advisory Council, interviewed by the Governor's Advisory Council, eventually chosen by the governor, but before they can be commissioners, they need to be confirmed by the Senate. They are regulators. These commissioners vote on prospective regulations and pass regulations, and they set seasons and bag limits. They are volunteers. Commissioners are not paid. Often they're retirees. They serve for 4-year terms, a maximum of 3 consecutive terms. They are a vote. All regulations, the seasons, the bag limits, they go up for a vote, and the commissioners vote. And they are representative. Each commissioner represents a different region of the state. So there are 9 game commission commissioners and 9 game commission regions. We're in Lycoming County. Does anyone know the Lycoming County Game Commission commissioner? I figured. Nobody knows.
You know?
Let's find out. Alan DeMarco. Well done. All right, someone did know.
A little bit of an insider there.
So Alan DeMarco is this region's commissioner for the Game Commission. The Fish and Boat Commission has 10 commissioners. There are 8 regions, and then there are 2 at-large commissioners that represent purely boating interests throughout the state. Is anyone familiar with the Fish and Boat Commissioner for this region, Lycoming County? Who is it?
Anybody?
Eric Assar? Eric Assar. All right, we know these ones. So we have Eric Assar is the district commissioner for the Fish and Boat Commission. And then the at-large commissioners are Charlie Charlesworth and Richard Lewis. So now we've gone through what's the Fish and Boat Commission, what's the Game Commission, who are the commissioners, and the chairman is really passionate about addressing chronic wasting disease. So he has a short video for you that we would like to share. It's called CW.
And before we start that, I just go over a couple notes of interest. You heard the concerns about a commissioner. You heard the concerns, maybe not the concerns, but the operational steps, if you will. So there was a vote that just took place this past weekend, meeting, preliminary, however you want to call it, because they do have a procedural type meetings, the commissioners, and then they will ultimately vote in a final, just like your township will do, just like even the state will do. And we're going to go over some of those things, and maybe right now I don't have the optic tonight with me. I brought a different vehicle, and I have that giant notebook. And my last meetings, I have a notebook that sits about that high with all the information, the 1,100 pages that I and my staff went through, which was the survey on whether or not the Saturday opener versus the Monday opener of deer rifle season should continue. And it was 60 to 63% do not change it from Monday. The reason that is important is because regardless of what side you land on with it, my point has always been, that's what the survey said from the Sportsmen. But what you're getting from the Game Commission is the exact opposite. This is why we're having these kind of discussions. This is why, for me, don't be afraid of truth. Let the truth be what it is. Deal with it and move on. But as of Saturday, I heard unanimously the commissioners said, we're going to continue with it the way it is now, which is the Saturday opener. I want to bring something else up with respect to how things work or are said. I have a long history in this. Much of it is hard for me to contain because there has been a big passion, as far as I'm concerned, with the tradition and heritage of hunting, fishing, and trapping in Pennsylvania and what has been going on. So every year, the Fish and the Game Commission have a presentation that they do in March to the legislature by requirement. And they will bring what is called their annual report to us. This year, like no other year since I've been there, the meeting was limited to 45 minutes. That was done by the other chair and or the Democrat Party sort of being concerned about what was going to get brought up. So I had 5 minutes at the end of the meeting to, as the chairman, to sort of proceed with my questions and so on. And they had their own written testimony that they presented to all of us, and then they read it to us like, sort of like elementary school kids, if you know what I mean. This is what we are telling you, like that. So when they get to the point where they have to mention names like mine, they skip over it. And here's the point about why I think this is so juvenile. I've had a passion about a piece of legislation which eventually got into law, which was to put hunter safety course in our schools. And I actually compromised that it wouldn't be in, and I was a school director, I ran policy, student activities, I know the process. But my compromise, if you will, was that it wouldn't be in curriculum, it wouldn't be a mandate, but that it could be done in every school district in Pennsylvania, which is 500, and there wouldn't be a charge to the students, and the game commissioner or whomever would, through their guidance, wanted to do the course, couldn't be denied. That's the important part, okay? So that we can continue the next generation, the feeding programs, the awareness, even using firearm safety in it. So I asked, since the day I was there, and numerous times until the law became law, or my idea became law, and then the executive director, whose picture was up there, had to step over my name because it was in black and white. That was offensive to him. And said we had over 50 hunter safety course in public school this year. Well, I was shocked with that. I was shocked to even read it. And I'm going to tell you why. I had been asking about a school in western Pennsylvania that I knew of that for 50 years they've been having a hunter safety course in their school. It's called Trinity Middle School in Washington, PA. Refused to be recognized by the Game Commission. 50 years. I was shocked. I mean, I didn't know. It's a western part of the state, you know. Sometimes, you know, the Steelers and the Eagles don't talk. But you know how that goes. But anyway, I was thrilled to know and hear about that. And then I got a call. I actually got an email request from a commissioner asking me how I could help them to do hunter safety course in school. That was this past year. So when I heard there was over 50, I wanted to know where they were. So this is actually a list of where they were, and there's a significant amount of them. Kudos. I'm glad. But remember, I couldn't get any support, and then there was over 50 according to Steve Smith. Well, we counted them. There's 41. Fuzzy math. They have that fuzzy math problem. But those are the realities, and this is why I think it's important to discuss this, because you might say you're splitting hairs. You're right on splitting hairs. You go from not acknowledging or not even supporting it to saying you had over 50, when in fact you had 41. And a commissioner calls me up and says, how can you help me to get these in school? First of all, I said the law is pretty clear that I fought for. And then to sit there in the meeting and to hear them say this when the commissioner had no clue. No clue. That's bothersome to me. There's a problem here with what's actually being done, talked about, or actually even, which brings me to the Saturday versus the Monday opener, when you have over a 60% survey of hunters that say don't change it, and then you spin it around to some other fuzzy math. It's a problem for me. If truth bothers you, then let's move on to why does it bother you. So I do this in these meetings because you wouldn't know it otherwise unless I told you. Okay? You can make of it what you want. But for me, that's part of the job that we have, and some of it's very disappointing to me to have to deal with the truth of it. So why don't you go on with the CWD issue, which I've had a tremendous concern about for many reasons. I'm not a biologist, I'm not a scientist, and I do not want to be. But I can read, and I can dive into things that I think are important. I've been a jock my whole life. I've been an athlete. I've raised children. I worked for myself for 25 years. There's things that you do and you educate yourself on that's important for your success, right? You just have to do that. So I read a book recently that we'll bring up later that has really bothered me from the science part of it. And I have talked to hunters, scientists, biologists all over the nation in the last 15 years. And nobody has an answer to this problem. And I'm not saying that it's easy, by no means. But what I am saying is when you watch this video, which is only pieces of the bigger piece, I think you're going to see why I'm so concerned and should be, just like you and I would be about any other issue. Okay? CWD, as we know, was first actually found in 1967 in Colorado. If you would like to be the biologist who came out of college and was put on that project, you would have retired 40-some years later with no answer, except for maybe what you may see tonight. And that's why I think it's important, because white-tailed deer, folks, are the #1 pursued species in North America. Anywhere from 92 to 94% of hunters' license sales is because of a white-tailed deer. A tremendously resilient animal, a tremendously fun animal, and some of the folks in this nation, which I'm going to give a shout out to, are the deer farmers, have done tremendous amount of work on trying to figure out what this problem is and how to proceed or to go forward. I had $1 million put in a budget a couple years ago for hunters' test kits. Do I have to tell you, through the Wolf administration, the Game Commission, and the Department of Ag, they decided that they would get together and they would take that money, they would redirect it out of the legislative purpose, $248,000 of which went to a company in California to train dogs to sniff poop. I know you feel the same way I did, but that's a fact. And so for me, it didn't give us answers, and it wasn't the purpose of that. So that's why, again, CWD to me, I don't know what the problem is, but I'm starting to get more and more suspect of things around us as to what it is that's creating this problem. So let's move into this video, and I hope you understand this is something you can look up. I've been contacted around the country, too, about this video, and after I shared it. It's called They Missed It by a Million Miles, but tonight we're just going to show you some pieces of it. So thank you.
They tell us it's infectious. They tell us it's the killer of deer. They tell us it's 100% fatal. They tell us that if we feed the deer, we are spreading it. They tell us it's from prions and they are everywhere. They tell us they are trying to stop the spread. They tell us they need our hunter-harvested deer to test for it. They use broken science. They have no answers after 57 years, yet they tell us we are on the verge of an epidemic. The agency's own document, the AFWA, contradicts what they restrict. Evidence to date suggests that restrictions on feeding quantity would not mitigate the potential for disease transmission, and that putative mitigating practices such as spreading feed or bait over a specified area or restricting the kinds of food items that can be used did not substantially reduce the potential risk for disease transmission. The narrative began in 1967. The one piece that is in agreement is CWD is a neurological degenerative disease that is focused on the brain and spinal cord. The rest of the narrative is filled with confusion, doubt, fear, power, and funds. Millions of dollars has been spent on research, restrictions, slaughtering, propaganda, and testing, while EHD and winters have killed tens of thousands. Where is the money coming from? There's a simple response: the people. Whether it is from the Pittman-Robertson funds, legislation, or license fees, it is the people. Recently, Federal Bill 5608, CWD Research and Management, was passed in the House with suspended rules and sent to the Senate, where it sat with no action taken for 8 months. The bill was then picked up in the Omnibus Bill, H.R. 2167, in December of 2022. $70 million a year for 6 years, equally $420 million. The bulk of the bill reads that state agencies and tribes can get a crack at millions as long as they follow a certain criteria in which the agencies wrote. New areas of detections, more funds. Strict management, more funds. More detections, more funds. Commitment of funds, more funds. There were many agencies and groups that lobbied or donated to the passing of the bill. Suddenly, an uptick in meetings, slaughtering, testing, and propaganda began across the nation. We aren't seeing the death. Where are all the dead deer they are telling us is happening by CWD? Testing, 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 testing.
Yep. An important element of this that the chairman really wants to bring attention to is prions and this being a prion disease. So the video is rather long. We have two just short clips. You can watch it all for yourself. The name is back there, but this is just a little bit about prions in particular.
Every image seen of a prion is an artist's impression, just graphics, none of the actual slide or actual image. In 2021, a research paper claimed to have a picture using magnification of 81,000. Well, I used an electron microscope. It was 126,000 magnification, and I can confirm that there are no such things as a prion. If you see germs, you should be able to see a prion. There are no such things as a prion. What the heck are they testing?
Okay. All right. So we're now going to move into our open conversation, and I just wanted to share some of the general concerns we've heard thus far. Concerns about habitat management. We were up in the Allegheny National Forest, and we heard a lot of talk about there's too much game land and too much DCNR land up that way. Sunday hunting, of course, support or oppose. The Monday versus Saturday debate. Trespass, particularly trespass with hunting dogs. Whether the wildlife censuses are accurate. Do we really know how many deer, how many turkey there are? Understanding and navigating regulations. What can and can't you do? Sportsman input within the commissions. Use of technologies while hunting, particularly with game cameras in public spaces. And antler restrictions. Okay.
So just briefly again, I think if you were to really watch that CWD video for yourself, you can understand this man who has spent more than half a century. What bothered me is I've heard this word prion pretty much since the beginning of CWD's name. I'm not actually, like I said, I'm not actually taking a position that I know what a prion is. But when you hear a scientist like that who has worked on this for half a century say there's no such thing as a prion, that gives me reason to pause as to what is this? Why do we have this problem that somebody like him, and again, the video is very important for you to see his work across the country, the globe. And why is this something that has I'll say another theory. People think it's bacteria. People think that it could be stimulated from something else. And I don't know what that answer is. But when I hear and know that we've gone for all this time without an answer, and to hear nationally known hunters that I am in conversation with across the country, they have some very strong opinions about this. Some of their opinions are as such. If it was a real problem, it had been fixed. If it's a true agricultural problem, it would have been fixed. If it's something that doesn't have another motive behind it, it would have been fixed. Or it would have been identified so that we could move forward. These are things that they say to me, and it would be just like you if you have simple layman's questions about, how do we proceed? How do we really know? And I'm going to give you a couple things to think about. If you're a deer farmer, and typically if you have a CWD positive in your farm, you're going to be really pressed, if not told, you have to slaughter every one. If you have a chicken farm, we all know what the latest flu did and some of the rhetoric that we got with it. I don't live far from Lancaster County. Matter of fact, within a half an hour. And I had people call me up and were told, we had 12 dead chickens out of 100,000 and we were told you had to kill them all. Why would you kill healthy chickens? So, again, I think there's more questions than answers when it comes to how do we combat something. You ever heard of herd immunity? There's an issue with that with respect to how, got chicken pox. Let's everybody in the family go over and see Susie. She's got the chicken pox. Once you all get the chicken pox, you're all immune from it, right? So there's a process here that in wildlife is probably no different when it comes to, let's answer this question. How do you have a double-fenced deer farm, and out of 100 deer, a deer comes down with CWD? I don't know the answer to that, but this is what I can tell you. It doesn't make sense to me. Because this is the other part that I've heard. It's so contagious that because it's transmitted through body fluids, which basically means when deer kiss and make love and do all the other things that animals do and drop droppings and urinate, their CWD pollution is all over the ground, right? So if the ground is so contaminated, why don't we have like a nuclear waste site everywhere? Nobody can answer that for me. I've asked numerous scientists about why is that way. We don't know. So, did a deer come down with something that came from the air because they're confined behind fences? I don't know that either. But I also don't believe that we should ignore certain successes we have. Again, I'm going to give another shout out to the nationwide deer farmers who have spent a tremendous amount of time and money on creating healthy CWD-resistant deer. So for me, that's sort of like you taking your vitamins, eating properly, getting your proper rest, being like an athlete, right? So you're healthy. You're resisting some of the natural attacks that may come to your body. Those are some of the things that I get, which brought me to reading this book lately. I couldn't put this book down. I would go back, I'd reread a chapter, I'd read it again, and then I'd go forward and I'd go back. And I couldn't get over this because this has to do with glyphosate. Glyphosate, for those of you that don't know, is Roundup. Roundup mixed with diesel fuel is Agent Orange. I am sure everybody in here knows what Agent Orange is. 2,4-D, which we use, has kerosene in it. There's a point in which that mix helps this chemical to be absorbed and to work. The only thing I'm going to do right now is to show you why this book was so important to me. I've got these little cheater glasses I have to use sometimes. This is one paragraph that I think can explain why this was so important to me. Monsanto knew for decades that glyphosate causes cancer and a deadly retinue of other devastating illnesses. Instead of warning its customers and consumers about this risk, Monsanto manipulated the science, defrauded regulators, bribed prominent researchers, transformed the EPA pesticide division into a cesspool of corruption, and promoted propaganda worldwide, systematically lying to the public that the deadly pesticide was safe. What's that sound like? I think there's a president that calls Washington the swamp. This company injured public health, destroyed our soils. Now think about the soils, okay? Where stuff grows that you eat. Exterminated species, wiped out small farms, and deprived the public of their fundamental civil rights of informed consent. Monsanto made a special project of discrediting and destroying scientists, advocates, and reformers who exposed its corrupt cover-up. Among the most prominent of these was heroic MIT researcher Dr. Stephanie Seneff. That's who wrote this book. In 2018, I was fortunate enough to be a part of a legal team that finally brought Monsanto to justice. We relied heavily on Dr. Seneff's research to achieve this victory. Robert F. Kennedy. I think for me, there are times where I come to a place where it's not about being suspect. It's about just having the truth. It's just about having answers to something that you need. I have a very good friend from church. He's now on his deathbed. He was a phenomenal county carpenter. Phenomenal. He started to slowly become sort of handicapped, not able to get around. His wife would have to help him with everything. Went to the doctor, and they finally diagnosed him with Parkinson's disease. This book goes into a lot of it. You know what the doctor asked him? Look, folks, I live in the country. I live around this. I am not attacking anything. What I want to know is just to be aware. The doctor said to him, "Do you live near a farm field?" He said, "Yeah, my grass goes right up against a cornfield for 40 years." He said, "Okay, say no more." And that's how he left it. Because I lost 2 beehives this past year. I have another honeyman who is irate when all his neighbors use any kind of spray because the bees go over there, they come back, and then the hive gets killed. My only point, folks, is we can't fix these issues. I think they're so huge. But for me, when I saw that video, when I had some of my questions just become bigger and bigger and bigger, I would have to ask you, why did the Game Commission this Saturday make a decision to now provide 1,312,000 antlerless licenses? That's 1,300,000. If your answer is the way we fix something is to just kill it, I just never bought into that science. I never bought into that game management. I never bought into that kind of animal husbandry. And I just believe that to know that the ideology that some of these individuals use, that we're supposed to just swallow, I just don't accept it. And I think for you all to know how some of us feel that are just like you, it's problematic. I'm a pretend farmer. I actually do a little bit because I'd like to work a piece of property that I think is a lot of fun and to do some things that are families and so on and so forth. But I don't want to do something stupid, right? I don't want to do something that I know isn't a help. So that's why I think some of these comparisons of the issues that we have are very important for us to just to be concerned with. So why don't we, why don't we just open up the microphone to any of the issues that may have been brought up? You could step to that microphone if you like.
So if you could, please go to that microphone right there, just so that everything's recorded. Share your name if you will, and the floor is yours.
Steve Little, I just wanted to ask you a question about, you showed us or talked to us about hundreds of millions of dollars of federal funds. Are they still going to Pennsylvania and to the commission? And money sometimes breeds, we got to keep this going, because if we don't, we lose our funding. Can you
So
address
that's a
that?
good question. That's a really good question, because for the most part, I think some of this is just an ongoing, as that video would explain, it's just an ongoing process of approved monies. And you asked a great question. I have an actual list that you can go on. I think there's specifically 2 sites. One of them is datarepublican.com. Charlie, what's the other one? usaspending.gov. I'm just going to read off a few things about the agencies that we all may support or be a part of, and just read the numbers that are attached to them. NWTF. You all know that I was the bad guy that uncovered a game commission going to the convention with 33 employees and spending $77,000 of your money. Remember that? They didn't like it, but that was a reality that I think we needed to know. National Wild Turkey Federation, $15,207,000. Trout Unlimited, $230 million. Ducks Unlimited, $373 million. Pheasants Forever, $152 million. Nature Conservancy. You know when you drive around here, not too far from here, and you see those signs? $567 million allocated or spent.
To fight chronic waste disease.
Not sure that you really know where it's going, or you have to just say it's going other places. But this is basically taxpayers' money coming out of an avenue from the government. Here is an interesting one you might like. This was for mushrooms. Penn State, $3.7 million. It went to the Farm Bureau. You know those people that get into game management instead of farming? Those guys. National Deer Association, and I know that you guys know of different people, hunters and whatnot, who actually are employed by this organization. 4.5 almost million dollars.
Cumulative over 10
Well,
years or whatever.
that's how it was identified. And so to answer your question, which I don't know the answer to that, is how and what year this goes, these are just identified as the amount on that site. And Rough Grouse Society being the last one, it's 6.3 million. So I think one of the things that I think is important to understand about that is it is part of our funds, and you do question, I mean I do, what is being used, where is that money going? And I'm going to give you the other example of what I did while I was a House member several years ago. If you didn't hear of the spotted lanternfly, that came to be in my backyard. Literally within 200 yards of my back property is where that was first identified. When the first Secretary of Ag, Mr. Gregg, when this was brought to him, I went to him about some things because I knew that there was somebody in Southeast Asia where this bug comes from that had told me that what they called it there, and that he said, yeah, we weren't going to call it that, so that's why we named it our own name, spotted lanternfly, when you look at it. And so I went to Washington, D.C., and I brought a bunch of information that I had. My days and months were so inundated with this problem, which to me was not a state rep's problem, but it was right there. I had millions of them on my trees. So I went to Washington, D.C. I remember Undersecretary Ibach, and I met with him, and I asked for some funds to help combat this because we didn't know what to do. And somebody had said it was suggested to ask for $5 million, maybe more. So I asked them for $10 million. And I was shocked when I got a call that they had allocated $17.5 million to Pennsylvania for the spotted lanternfly. I honestly, folks, can't tell you where any of that money is. Went to Penn State, the Ag Department. I couldn't tell you how they used it. I couldn't tell you I couldn't tell you anything about it. Which is why I think those numbers that I just read off to you are problematic to me, because you don't know what continues, you don't know what comes out of it, except for when you see that video when they explain that every time they have more testing or every time they say there's something more positive, more money is given out. So it's a discussion that is, to me, it's just a problem. I mean, no wonder there's a DOGE in the federal government to figure out where money is going. But those are problems to me that exist today that we don't even really have any answers for.
But you're the chairman for us and represent the Sportsmen in Harrisburg, correct?
Yes. I am the Republican chairman of the House Game and Fishery. There is a Democrat chairwoman. She has one majority vote more than me, and she runs the agenda.
So what resources do you need, or what can you do to try to control where these funds are going, and if they're doing any good? I mean, it's
well,
tax money.
That's a good question, because there's a legislative process that we don't necessarily, as legislators, except through the appropriations, if there's a line item that gets agreed to or gets voted on, passes, and within that line item, that's not even so necessarily clear either, because what follows that line item is what's called the fiscal code. So you may see $10 million on a line item, but until you read the fiscal code that corresponds with that line item, So
it's a big swamp.
Pretty much. It's very difficult.
Well, I guess as a concerned guy standing here tonight, I just ask you to keep driving
and that's what I'm doing. But I'm going to tell you guys one other thing, because there is such a difference across the state of Pennsylvania with your representatives and with your senators, that to me, there's only one office that needs your calls now, and that's the governor's office. He tries to hide. He tries to use the obscure website to make things difficult. In the back there, we have the information, how you can get in contact with them, and I would beg of you to let him have it. If he thinks it's okay to take over an independent agency, then you got every right in the world to know what they're doing.
I would just like to add that when it comes to federal funding, there's Pittman-Robertson funds, which go to the Game Commission, and there's Dingell-Johnson funds, which go to the Fish and Boat Commission. I have an informative paper on the back that describes those funds, but it's essentially an excise tax. Every time you buy a gun, buy ammunition, buy hunting supplies, some of that money goes to the federal government, and then it gets allocated to the states. There's info on that in the back. It's separate from the CWD funding issue, but just for your insight.
And that is a very good point. Thank you, Griffin. Which I had brought up numerous times, because there's guidelines as to where that money is supposed to go, and for the state of Pennsylvania to qualify for that money. And if you read in the news, last year $150 million was proposed to be taken out of the game fund, which I take offense to, as I think every one of you would have too, because that is the sportsman's money. There were and are requirements that anything that's attached to the Pittman-Robertson funds must be spent for. And one of those biggest issues that I've always had is habitat, okay? When you have such bad habitat in our game land, which is their responsibility, and they're not hurting for money, then you realize that there is a negligence there that should be addressed. And so I put out a press release saying you can't take that money. I found a case in the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania where when Governor Wolf at the time tried to take money from a state agency, which was DCNR, the court said, unconstitutional, give it back. This was an independent agency, and when I put that out, all the groups that knew that this was a problem all jumped on board and said, yeah, you can't take that money. However, we get crafty in government, especially where there's a pot of gold. And so other initiatives were going on as to how they can do that, just like right now. They want to take 391 acres of state game land out of the camp up in Carbon County, which is basically game land, and you're not getting a choice in the matter. You as sportsmen do not get a choice in the matter. Oh, it's going to be okay, Dave, because we're going to get state forest land for it. Well, that's not what the Pittman-Robertson funds say. That's not the protocol. And again, I'm not splitting hairs. I'm sticking to the process. I'm sticking to my convictions of why sportsmen should not be insulted. And if you need any better example, remember Fast Eddie? Fast Eddie thought he could take state game land and sell it. Think about that. That's why, to me, it's so concerning. You don't just let the camel's nose get underneath the tent and then take over. So, good questions. Is there anybody else?
Next, we have Larry Weaver to discuss handicap access.
I just had a quick question. Is who do I contact about getting more? Unfortunately, I've got a problem with access.
This is what I would tell you, sir, and I have addressed this in the past, and it's very disappointing to me. I actually was in this conversation earlier today because I was stocking trout up in Francis Walter Dam, and somebody approached me about something, and I will tell you, regionally is probably the answer to your question, and if you would need that help, I would be glad to do that. But regionally, so that a specific area that you may be interested in that gets identified can be questioned about, and then we would go from there.
I would really appreciate that. 'Cause, I mean, one of the DCNR requirements, they gave me a permit that I can drive once they have two roads in Loyalsock County or Loyalsock Forest. There are only two.
Right.
But I can't take someone with me to help me on those roads.
Yeah, it's a problem.
You know,
So I would say that regionally, and if I can facilitate anything, I'll be glad to do it. And I want to tell you, Size, why I think, again, looking at you individually, sir, you remind me of the reason that I proposed that antler restriction be removed for seniors. A couple reasons. First of all, we have more evidence that a deer that stays longer on the ground and older on the ground with and chances of getting CWD is because they're older. So if we can let juniors take a spike buck or a Y buck, why wouldn't we allow the seniors to do the same thing, especially, sir, and you remind me of this, my dad has dementia right now, and his hunting days are over. But it could be, every day could be our last day hunting, right? I think we should all and could all understand and admit that we're graciously grateful that we can go out.
Yeah.
But something could happen tonight, tomorrow, and that may be our last day. So for the sake of true management and such, especially when you want to slaughter the deer with numbers that don't even make sense, why would we not let seniors participate in something that could be their last day? So the same way with access. I agree wholeheartedly, and I would be glad if I can help to help.
I'll get with you after the meeting and get some information in. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
And for all here, there's a contact form in the back that directs you at each level of government, local, state, or local, county, state, and federal, of who to contact and what they can control.
Well, my question's sort of related. I wonder why locally here, like Cumming County, the Armstrong Road is closed. It's about 6 miles dirt road, Bald Eagle Mountain. They used to have it open year-round, and now it's closed 8 or 9 months of the year.
Do you know what time it is open?
I think it's almost October till January. Hunting season only.
So basically, we'll say the rifle season, it's open.
I think they open it in archery, and it's open through the regular season.
Okay.
I don't think it is open in muzzleloader.
And it's not open in turkey season.
No, it always was. I mean, I've lived near there, and
When did that close?
they started doing that last year.
So that'll be a question that I'll just simply have to ask.
Yeah, who makes those decisions?
So that's a good question. But again, there is a piece of state forest, state game land, gates owned or controlled by different agencies. But what I have come to find out is regionally, there's decisions made that may not be Commonwealth. Does that make sense?
What was the word you just?
Regionally. So because we have regions, like you might have a southeast region, a northeast region, a west, center, out of those office areas within that jurisdiction that you're talking about could be the answer or where the decision got made to your question.
Is that one person makes a decision, and why would they do that? I mean, that's owned by the people.
So
forest.
Here is my dilemma, sir. I can ask a lot of questions. They don't like to give me the answers. And so then I do right to knows. And then they illegally deny me the right to know information, which I got a call this last week on that very subject. So it's a real problem. I will help in any way I can to try to get you that answer. But this is why we have a problem with certain people, not all. I want to be clear about that. There are some, I go way back with the Game Commission before most of those people were ever employed. Maybe before most of them were ever born. That's a fact. Because my dad was very much a helper in the Game Commission going way back in time from the Southeast. And I grew up loving it. And I would like to show you even a picture that I won an award, get this, in 5th grade for my hobby. Guess what they called it? The most unusual. My hobby was a .22 rifle and a beaver trap. That's what's in the picture because that's what I was being raised to be aware of and do. And that was in elementary school. I actually had my .22 in school at the time. So I want to be clear about there are good people in these agencies that are being blocked by bad supervisors. So to your point, could there be one person? There could be.
It seems it's not costing any money to keep the gate open. These guys have to drive in their pickups around somewhere.
Yeah, I agree.
Jack? Is it which one is Jack? I'm Jack. Jack. Yeah, I have your form here. I took a note, and I'll reach out and get back to you.
I appreciate that very much.
You're very welcome. That
Next,
was Armstrong Road, right?
Harry Rogers, local here. On the Fish Commission side, I just opened up a property which I had closed for about 5 years for fishing because, one, trash, which is a main problem. people walking in the fields. They wouldn't stay out of the planted fields. So, and I also trying to get the Fish Commission to side on being able to take bars out of the creek, which their answer was, we're not touching that information. We won't even go there. I said, well, if you don't want to support the people that own the land, why should we support keeping it open? I did finally agree to open it back up as a delayed harvest. I tried getting it as fly fishing only. They told me absolutely not. We're not making any more. Actually, we're getting rid of them. You have to do artificial only. I did open it that way. After dealing with a regional individual on that, with the answer that I'm a fly fisherman. I can take you right now to 4 different fly fishing areas that I go, that's all it is. Why can't we make one? We also already have a delayed harvest on Muncie Creek. Why do we need another artificial only? Why can't we have it as fly fishing only? They would not agree to that. That's on the Fish Commission side.
Can I just ask you a question before we go any further? Is it stocked?
Yes, it's stocked.
Okay. So I just want to give you a couple things about that.
It wasn't stocked the 5 years I had it closed.
It wasn't, right,
No.
because they wouldn't allow you, they wouldn't stock it if you didn't allow access. So whether you're a purist or whether you specialize or whatever, I get that. I truly 100% get that, and that's everybody's sort of priority, if you will. But this is what I would say on a general sense of going back to my passion about kids, mentoring, and, if you will, fertilize the plants, which would be our kids, and give them something to keep them stimulated. And if we didn't have the fish in the streams, folks, those kids wouldn't have interest. And 2/3 of our streams in Pennsylvania, think about that number, 2/3 would not have trout in them if we didn't stock them. So that's a dynamic. Whether or not you can come to an agreement with them, I know there's some issues there, and I can't really speak to that right now because I know there's a certain amount of, I don't particularly like the Class A transfers years ago where it just blocked a whole bunch of access that people never, that could use for years and years and didn't. I don't know that particular, but I would thank you for doing what you did and for knowing that without your permission, there wouldn't be any trout there.
Actually, there are. I mean, before.
Well, you're going to
before
probably
opened
have a
back
certain
up,
amount of
my son
natives,
fished
and I'm
down
not going to
through
get into
there.
the guru of being that, but I would say that from the bigger sense, you wouldn't have what I'm saying as the higher percentage of interest fish to that point. But I think what you can do, and again, I would be willing to help you with this. I do have a good working relationship with the executive director of the Fish Commission, Tim Schaefer. I cannot say the same for the Game Commission. But he has been very open to a process, if you will, as to how that can happen or change. So, again, I'm willing to be here for the Sportsmen of Pennsylvania with whatever the question is. I may not know the answer or what's best for the area. But again, as a landowner and somebody like you that has done this, kudos and thank you, because I understand the trash. I understand the litter. I understand the disrespect that's taught by adults to kids. That's where it comes from. And it's disappointing to me. But typically when a place is gone, it's gone. And yours to come back is an exception.
Well, one of the options was keep it closed, do it as a fly fishing club, which I have friends that are members over on Fishing Creek. Costs $400 a year. They stock it. They fish it only. I could make it a private stretch. It's almost a mile long.
Yeah, that's a
but
lot.
I decided not to go that direction. Second point, on the hunting side, when they decided to make crossbows legal, I know our local warden here, I brought it up to him as they did that, and I said, you didn't even think about the farmer, did you? And he kind of looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, you outlawed spotlighting during rifle season, but you can spotlight during archery season. A regular bow, whether it's a compound, recurve, straight bow, you can't stick out a window and shoot. You can with a crossbow. And I said, who's going to pay for that $2,500 tractor tire when I drive over it in the field and ruin a tire? It made his eyes get big. Why can't we outlaw spotlighting during any deer season?
I don't think the question is why can't we? I think the question is why didn't they? So that's a possibility. I wouldn't, because it's a regulation. It's not something that's statutorily done. They can do it. And I do think that some of those problems exist because, let's just think about something. I'll bet you that the large majority of the people sitting in this room remember 2 weeks of buck season and 1 or 3 days of doe season. Right?
And 2 weeks of archery.
And then, right. And then archery season turned into the month of October. And then now it's beyond. Okay? So probably the quick answer to that is that regulation didn't follow the changes. That's probably the quickest answer that I could come up with, just to be fair. There is a problem with some people. I think the bigger decision probably with archery versus rifle is, you said it, that you obviously can open up a window or you can spotlight with a rifle a little bit more precisely and quicker than you can with a bow, for the most part.
I'll agree with that to a point, but when you can also now with these crossbows shoot out 75, 85,
Without a
95
doubt.
yards or more.
Without a doubt.
And whether they kill the deer or not, you put that bolt in my field and
Right.
I hit it with a tractor tire, I'm not going to be happy. I
Right.
can't sue the game commission.
No. What I would tell you, though, is that it doesn't help the situation, but I'm sure there's insurance policies and maybe there's deductibles and all the rest of the stuff that does take place. But there's also a point in trying to catch those perpetrators and make them pay.
And the same thing, one of the main roads that we have that problem, my son lives in that one farm. They spotlight the house and the barn. This is a problem continuously year to year. Our warden knows about it. I've talked to him about it.
You know, there
You
are
can try and
states.
sit there, but we put him on a 40-hour work week.
I know.
So he can't work at night because he
There are
can't do
states
his
that
day
don't even
job.
allow spotlighting at all.
Personally, I wouldn't mind seeing that.
Yeah, yeah, and it could move to that, or it could move to regional areas. I don't know, but it is a problem. But people who like to break the law will continue to break the law, probably even if it's illegal. You know, because they could stretch it another time. So it's point well taken.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, if we could have Mike Christ. You wanted to discuss hunting regulations.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank you and Representative Ham for taking time to put this meeting on for us tonight. And I'd like to use a go-back card. I want to talk about Saturday versus Sunday hunting or Monday hunting. Representative Smith from, I think, Indiana and Jefferson County.
Mm-hmm.
He
Jefferson.
proposed legislation, House Bill 70, which returns it back to the Monday
Yeah, I know.
start.
I'm very familiar with it.
What's the chances of that getting out of
Well, with the
committee?
Democrats in charge, probably very little. With the governor not wanting controversy, probably less. But there's always a chance that a parliamentary type movement could get to the end of that without it being maybe a up or down vote. It could be an amendment. It could be something else. But as of Saturday, the Game Commission said no. That's the problem we have, because the voice of the sportsmen are typically not listened to, which is why I'm here today. Only because I may not wield any authority or power, but I do have experience and a voice. And for me, for you to be able to do that is the first time in the history of Pennsylvania that this has been done. And so you only reinforce, to me, the problem that exists. Because the people, the hunters, sportsmen, clearly did not want to change, regardless of where a person may stand on. Look, I asked the executive director in my office one day, I said, like, what do you see as the positive result of this change? Are you ready for this? Well, I know of 2 people that went hunting Saturday that didn't otherwise go Monday. See, to me, that's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to me that you would have an executive director answer with such an answer, knowing what the sportsmen clearly said they did not want changed. Besides the businesses that it impacted, besides the fact that it's, Thanksgiving holiday, besides all of those things, I'm going to share with you, which I've shared in the past. I have a text message on my phone that came from an individual out of state when they made that decision, meaning the Game Commission, for that Saturday opener. And this is how that text message goes. What the blank were they thinking? There's going to be people divorced over that.
It's a challenge. It really is.
That's what it says.
They were thinking that, we're giving another day for school to go. Our schools get off for hunting season.
Yes.
So it didn't make a difference.
Yes, and one of the presentations that we had here, which is a little bit unfortunate because, these programs are sort of moving and they sort of take on a little bit of a different form of themselves. But if you want to look up on the website, you can see the one that we did in, what was the town? The last one. The second, Clarion. Up in Clarion, a young lady brought out all the data. You had the Saturday opener people and her and the different ones that just used the data from the Game Commission. It clearly shows the mess up. Clearly shows it. And once again, something with good intentions as far as a independent agency can go awry without checks and balances. And I would like to see the sportsmen be able to elect their commissioners. To me, it would be one of the most productive pieces of change that we could ever have. And I see all your heads nodding because you don't feel like you have a voice. Just think, you elect Representative Ham if you live in his district. You elect me if you live in my district. You elect a senator if you live in that district. And you elect a governor. The governor shouldn't have anything to do with these things except for a bill that goes to his desk, whether he signs it or he vetoes it. That's why you need to call him. That's why you need to say, look, we know that you don't know anything about this. We know that $4 billion of revenue is generated by the sportsmen of Pennsylvania. We know that there's a lot of pretenders out there. We know that our voice may not have been heard before, but it should be. So, again, I'm here to help in any way I can. Our time is limited, I think, in this life, and to make the best of it, I think this is who we are.
Well, we hunt, just to add one more thing, we hunt Pine Creek Valley, Waterville, and so forth up that way. And every establishment that we would go in to support are crying the blues because they're not having the customers. The economic impact is significant.
And that data has been collected. And that data is extremely problematic for the Game Commission to ignore. That is a big, big problem, which I would actually tell you. I wasn't going to say this, but I'm not going to say it in the verbiage I'd like to. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean because this is something that goes out to the public, this meeting. But I want you to read between the lines. I represent Pennsylvania, and I have for a long time, for quite a while, in the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus, which is nationwide. And we'll go to workshops in different states when they designate that time. And I'm like a sponge when I go there. I try to take in every bit of information and talk to the reps from all over the country, get to know people and things. The number one concern has been for some years now that ideologues that are not sportsman related have infiltrated these agencies and are destroying them. They are destroying them. They're unelected. They're bureaucrats that get deeply infiltrated into these agencies. They make decisions, and you may not see it right away, but it is a problem across the whole United States. So think about that as to why we should be able to elect our own commissioners, and you need to go to the governor and say, stop the nonsense.
I'll do my share.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And again, I want to thank everybody. I could stay here all night because this has been my life. This is something that I believe in, and I believe truly if we don't have the next generations following us, we're going to lose it.
Just a little bit more insight into the Monday versus Saturday issue. Overwhelmingly, the law does not determine the seasons or the bag limits. That's entirely regulation. Representative Smith's House Bill 70, which would set in statute the start of deer rifle season as the Monday following Thanksgiving, is rare. But we have heard such an outcry, and we recognize the financial impact and the cultural impact that we argue that this is a realm for the legislature to act outside of regulation.
I believe you. I'd put quite a few things in the statutory requirement if it was up to me because I believe in the history, and I would put a lot of things statutorily, which would be, my first thing would be commissioners be elected by sportsmen, because that is not what happens.
Up next, we have Willie Williamson, who was going to discuss wildlife management and DCNR. You can take the microphone.
Mr. Maloney, thanks a lot for coming here, and for my family, my daughters who go rabbit hunting with beagles. They trap. Okay, we own 50 acres with a hunting cabin in southern Potter County. Like
How many
you
daughters
just
you
said
have?
with the dull license
How many
application.
daughters you have?
Huh?
How many daughters you have?
2.
Okay, I got you
They
beat.
both go fishing and
Okay,
hunting.
I got you beat. I got 3.
They go snowshoe hare hunting,
That's awesome.
and they only would kill 1 hare.
It's absolutely
one
awesome.
snowshoe, because that's the way they were taught.
That's awesome.
Instead, they could have shot more, but they said no, 1's enough.
Yeah, they're being a conservationist is
Right.
what they're being.
In any event, our hunting has gone to holy hell along the Mahoney Creek, Kettle Creek, all through from Mahoney, all the way up through to Cottersport. Once you get up into 3A, ticks up a little bit, but these DMAPs, these DMAPs on top of the allocations. I was down Harrisburg 2 years ago. I'm done going down there to their April, March meeting. But they make DMAPs in the whole goddamn state forest area up there.
That's why I tried to explain the fact that these numbers have gone so far up.
They jumped it last year, the dull license allocation. Now they just raised it again. There's nothing around. You could talk to any seasoned hunter, and I hunt in the big woods. And there was snow on the ground for the whole second week, and I'm there for the whole 2 weeks. I hunt in New York State, South Dakota, Montana. I've had my daughters to Montana. They get CWD out there. You know what the Indians say? It's a way of cleansing the herd. And they come back. You're right about your presentation. It's a bunch of bullshit.
Can I get a ticket to go with you?
Huh?
Can I buy a ticket to go with you?
The tags are getting smart. They're $800 for a deer tag.
I know.
But what I'm getting at is, and I'm not yelling at you. I
No.
know you're fighting for us.
No, I get
I'm
it.
all the way back to Don Mel, down there at Harrisburg. Vern Ross.
Yes.
There's other clown that just got shit canned. I live right next to the Northeast Regional Game Commission building. On Sunday, 26 Game Commission vehicles parked in their parking lot in their brand new building there. Wow. What is going on with them? They are a cult. The Game Commission has turned into a cult. You're right about we need to let us decide who our commissioners are. Because Borodura doesn't know a effing thing what goes on up in southern Potter County and Cameron County. And I'm sure you've heard it about up there quite a bit. It's decimated. You talk to any seasoned hunter, he'll tell you there's only 2 or 3. There's no packs of 15 or 30 deer running around up there anymore. I saw it. I was raccoon hunting with my uncles when I was 7, 8 years old, climbing those mountains with coon dogs. Okay, but I think we're getting fake data on their deer kill last year.
That's called fuzzy math.
It's terrible. It can't be so. I know people up there from Cartersville, people that live up there. There was very few deer. I could have shot does all season long. A couple, you know what I mean? But I feel sorry for them. My daughters won't even shoot doe no more.
So why do the allocations go up?
I know. What is going on? You don't see them in fields anymore. You don't see the deer. They're not there. But this Steinbrook guy, he's the head of the elk program and the deer program. But what is his problem? Do you know this Borodura guy?
I know of them.
They're all big Democrats.
Look, it's not working, which is why I go back to the governor needs to be addressed. The governor needs to be called because at the end of the day, he has to take a certain amount of responsibility to this agency not respecting the sportsman.
It's just like with Rep. Han. I go into Bobek's office. She's gone. You know what I mean.
I know.
Oh, CWD. They got him so brainwashed. Yeah, that's why we can't have deer. CWD, we got to get rid of them. But you got to talk to your other representatives and other senators and try to bring the ones that know nothing about hunting.
I've tried to do that since the day I came there, and I would tell you, listen, I really and truly, in the light of credibility, in the light of people being in their own arena, that doctor, that biologist, that man who made that video, it is so clear. It is so explained. And it cannot be negated. It cannot be shot down. And I said it from many times. I don't know the answers. I don't even pretend to know the answers. But there's a lot of other people who do pretend to know. But at the end of the day, they don't have the answer. So that's what frustrates me. It very much frustrates me.
With the in state forest.
Yeah.
Took with these DMAPs, but everything's a DMAP.
I know.
Okay, Christian, what the hell's her name? She's a commissioner.
Kristen.
Hogoforth or whatever.
Yeah, the one that's up in the northwest.
Yeah, she had said at the commissioner meeting that the DMAPs have been going on for 10, 12, 14, 15 years, and when do they back off the allocation for those acreages of the DMAP area, which is 1 coupon for every 5 acres. I forget what that ratio is, but she said this. She made it. I have it right on my phone. That she mentioned that at the commissioner meeting. I guess that when is enough is enough.
Well, exactly right. And again, if you've heard some of the things that were already said tonight, whether you have to sort of read between the lines or look at the insinuation of the issues, we have individuals who are behind the scenes driving this ship. And if you have commissioners who we already went through the process of how they get there, if there isn't a way in which there's an accountability, then it's nothing more than a seat warmer. Really. No disrespect. It's just a seat warmer. If you ran a business like this, it not only would fail, but you wouldn't make it to the next board meeting because you'd be gone.
They would tell him, where are you going here? There's no deer here no more. You know what the word historic people say? They've ruined it. It's over. They've ruined it. They want, I think it's partly because of the elk, which are in my backyard right now up there probably, in our front yard. I think that has something to do with.
I don't doubt it, but there's a vast part of the Pennsylvania that doesn't have elk in it. And again, I didn't even bring this up, but from day one as a legislator, I brought up our state bird, which is the grouse. It has fallen on deaf ears until this past year. They now came to me and said, look, we're working on a spot for the habitat of grouse. Sorry to hear that. There you go.
I worked underground in a coal mine for a year. Okay, last thing I want to bitch about is the fences. Have you ever seen these fences up there?
You mean in the so-called observation areas?
The fences, the goddamn trees are 15, 20 foot high, and the fences they're still up. I called Nichols up there. He's a DCR in the North Central PA. I called Harrisburg. When are you going to start thinking we don't have the money? We don't have the money.
Isn't that like a common answer?
Did you ever see the fences?
Oh, absolutely. So I proposed something.
About walking the Yellow Gate.
Yeah.
I walk Yellow Gates like you'll never 6 miles. That ain't nothing.
Yeah.
But, I do a lot of fall scouting. I do a lot of turkey hunting. I'm going up there right now turkey hunting. The fences they're 10 miles back.
Have you, when you said that you've gone to different people, even just the elected that you do know and do represent you where you geographically live, have you discussed this with them?
Hell yeah, I talked to Eric, or the Jewish kid that just left.
Aaron Kauffer. Aaron Kauffer.
Coffer, I
I think he replaced Boback.
Pew took over for Coffer. They don't know anything what I'm talking about.
They don't. I understand.
Coffer, he has no inclination. I said, whatever the Republicans vote on with the game commission, please vote with them. You know, it's just deplorable. I'm going to let you go with that.
Well, again, I appreciate it. I'm very accessible electronically or otherwise, and share your concerns the best that you can. And again, the governor's office must hear from the sportsmen.
The Penn State is a cult too within. And I'm a Penn State football fan, but they have a Penn State. You probably heard the deer crew up there.
Oh, yeah.
They moved their traps in the Susquehanna State Forest 7 times because they weren't catching a goddamn deer. Then they raised the allocations. 50,000 doe tags they give out.
It's fuzzy math. It's fuzzy math.
You're talking all good season hunters up there. Bear hunters. Sorry, no deer up there no more.
Yeah. Do you know that the bear is the #1 predator to the fawn? Did you know that? Yeah, because you're a sportsman. The first bigger name biologist of Pennsylvania after 25 years said he didn't know that.
I don't bear them. I don't even like them around my cattle.
Yeah.
I don't bear them.
Yeah. Well, I like to eat them. But anyway, I would just tell you that to me, it's a communication issue that doesn't have the proper facts with it, and that's what happens over and over and over. And again, there are numbers of sportsmen that's been problematic. It has changed. I did get a report from somebody inside, I'll say politically, that the sportsmen have been more engaged in this past year than they were before. And that is a problem, because if you understand that if you don't get engaged in the election process, then you're not even being heard in the booth. So there's a piece to that if the sportsmen were really organized and coordinated, just think about that number. Just think about that number if we were. Yeah, less than that. But think about that number. If we were engaged, we not only would control Pennsylvania, we would control the White House. You would have to be principled and understand that losing this heritage and this tradition that we have in Pennsylvania would be so important that you need to be organized, and there are many, 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 many that do not get engaged. Well, you can. Anybody can with respect to passion. They really can. But I would tell you again, as I would tell everybody, please contact the governor's office, voice your concerns, and let them know that you just feel like you've not been heard, and this is getting worse and worse, and you need change.
I think the increase is going to lose us because we take kids hunting.
I know.
It's dwindling and
I know. It's been my passion forever. I'm going to just leave you with something. You mentioned somebody's name. Just in light of the changes that happen for different reasons. Does anybody here know why we have management units, wildlife management units? Do you have any idea why we have them? Okay, we have them because a former executive director had a gripe against a county treasurer. Well, that was one of them. But the fact of the matter is, it was not about game management, folks. Wildlife management units is just the name of it. If you think about how it was before with the 67 counties, they were definitive lines, they were more concentrated, they were easier to watch. Now, could you have more counties together? Yeah, I'm not going to debate that. My point is, they were not developed for wildlife management. It was Vern Ross who had an issue with a county treasurer and said, we'll fix this. So it didn't have to do with management. That's my whole point. Yeah, well, this is why we need our voice. Is there anybody else? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Anybody else?
So
I'm sorry. Hey, I gotta get going. I'm going back to Dallas.
Be careful. Watch your rabbits.
I love the Beagles.
Thanks
so much for trying to help us.
You're welcome.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Sorry.
The chairman briefly represented or spoke about grouse habitat, and Steve Little had some questions about grouse habitat. Steve, if you'd like to express those. Grouse habitat and pheasant stalking.
DCR forestry practices are the pits. It's not how it's supposed to be done. There's terrible forestry on state.
Well, I'm since you brought that up, and I know you're leaving, I had the opportunity. I actually could have had this opportunity and had this opportunity for many, many years and didn't utilize it. But during the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus, and it was held down in Dewey, Delaware, I took the opportunity of a one day to educate myself on their land down there and where to hunt. And I went on a hunt. And this is what happened. I went in on state land, and I met the forester there. Actually met about 3 of them there who worked in there. And I told them I was from PA because there was other guys from all over the country. And so they took to me right away, and we were chatting a little bit, and this is how it ended up. Well, we come from Pennsylvania, and we don't agree with any of the forest management that takes place in Pennsylvania. They said, we don't even want to be, like, considered a comparison. And that's what they told me. I was like, I didn't bait it. I didn't think it was going to happen. I wanted to know about hunting, and that's what they told me. So, to your point, I thought you would think that interesting. Okay. So anyway, sir.
Yeah, I promise not to ramble on, but just a couple of issues that concern me, and I want to voice them. With the pheasant stocking, it just seems like in the last year or so, the stocking truck shows up at 9, 10 o'clock, and there's 10 trucks alongside of them. They leave the birds out, and in my mind, it's not even safe. If I'm there on the day they stock that happens, I get back in my car and go home. It's dangerous. The game wardens complain about it, but they just, why can't they do what common sense is and stock them late in the afternoon or at evening? That's what they do in New York State. I mean,
yeah, well, this has come up for years, and I 100% understand what you mean. I think it goes back to the etiquette that has bothered me many times about why certain sportsmen just don't seem to, they seem very selfish when it comes to,
shoot them on the roads.
oh yeah, there's literally there's no real sportsmanship to it. It's not fair chase. But you bring up something that I would also, is really problematic to me. So over the last several years, the Game Commission closed all of our pheasant farms. They may justify it as a business decision, but let me tell you the rest of the story. So I know somebody very well who provides pheasants for the Game Commission and other clubs and everything else. And so when they closed the last of the pheasant farms of Pennsylvania, the Game Commission then let out all of those pheasants that we had that were being studied with a Pennsylvania-specific DNA. So all those pheasants are gone. All that study. The man who came up to me and did the work for decades said all that data is gone, all that DNA is gone, all that study is gone. Then even more egregious money-wise is some of those pheasant farms received Growing Greener grant money that had a time frame that you needed to continue with. So they won't do anything with that until that 10-year period of time is done, because then they feel justified that they can move on to the next project. Yeah. But again, why? Why? You know, we don't always get something right, but it doesn't mean we can't work at it. Doesn't mean we can't get better at it. Yeah. And so that's, to me, an investment that you all have made, and you probably didn't know.
That's sad to hear, because everyone was here. We live on a border, and you live in the prime spot. You know, we grew up shooting pheasants.
Yeah.
Wild birds. There's nothing here, so there's stock birds, so we can go to the game lands or we can go
Right.
pay.
Right.
And my concern is the safety issue and a little common sense. Don't stock them in the morning. Stock them at 4 o'clock. You know, they get a chance to at least disperse a little bit.
I think it's something that we'll put on the list.
Well, that's probably this deal. But, you know, geez, if you own your business, I bet you could tell them, well, you come to work at noon today and you can work to 8 tonight, you know, if you don't have to be here. The second thing is the grouse habitat. And I know you're looking at it. I don't know if shooting all those deer is going to help a lot, but it's a shame that the grouse is going the way of the pheasants.
Without a doubt. And I want to tell you why I brought this up for 15 years. Not only is it our state bird, but it's a game bird that is beautiful. It's a game bird that's fun. It's a game bird that needed to be protected. And the problem for me was every biologist that ever wrote about it or talked about it would say habitat, habitat, and the Game Commission just used West Nile virus as the problem and said that was it. You know, to only come to know that in the last couple of years there's like 2 locations that they're trying to do a study on. But again, the habitat is tied to Pittman-Robertson funds. It's tied to the responsibility of the Game Commission. And for the Game Commission to ever bring up poor habitat when it's their responsibility, to me, that's a problem. You know, money isn't an issue. It really is not. And so if you would have stayed with your mission, if you would have stayed with the priority going forward, or while it was happening, you could then know by going forward, you could see that those advancements and those changes would have been productive. And I couldn't agree with you more. I honestly believe that if we see the day that comes when suddenly there'll be no rough grouse hunting, it'll because they shirked their responsibility to make sure that our state bird was healthy. Yes, sir. Up to the microphone, please.
Your problem with our state forest goes all the way back under Rendell. He put an individual into the head of Bureau of Forestry that believed that we should go back to a triple canopy forest, never cut a tree, and we've been following that ever since.
Yeah.
I hunt on the mountain up above Lock Haven for bear. The Saturday opening killed our bear hunting because we didn't have enough people with our camp to be able to put on a good-sized drive. So we used Sunday to talk to 2 or 3 or 4 to camps, set up the drives and stuff so we could hunt. Now we go out and sit because we can't have the time to ever set it up to do it. But they don't cut. What they do cut, they'll cut a 50-acre block, then they put 10 feet fence up and don't take it down for 15 to 20 years.
Yeah. So there's a point that you made that those present may or may not be aware of. And that was many years ago, there was an initiative called Green Certification. And the Green Certification was so that the Pennsylvania lumber would be certified as premium, and that in order to do that, the number one recommendation was reduce the deer herd.
Volume.
So this goes back to some time, but it also goes back to getting off the tracks of what you were to do. So if the state forest wanted to take a position that they wanted to change certain practices, it should have never rolled into the Game Commission with game land, because the number one priority that they have is the sportsman. And I know a certain executive director that I finally told off very harshly one day when I kept hearing him say, see all that land up there and see how desolate? If a deer lived here, he'd have to pack his lunch. I said, sir, that's your responsibility. You can't just blame it as if it just happened overnight. There's a responsibility for you to get involved to create better habitat and to make that work. But look, it continues until we see certain changes that can be positive.
Well, the reason we had the deer population we had back in the 60s, 70s is because all our woods were cut off 50, 60 years before that.
Yeah.
So we had the growth and regeneration
There was a cycle.
of the forest.
There was a cycle of
So
time.
there was food for the deer. We now have, the trees are now 100 years old. There's no underground cover. The last 2 years, we've had a hard frost in the spring after the oak were already flowering. We had no oaks on the mountains up there, i.e. no bear, no deer. They're down in the farmland. They're not going back.
So you bring up something I think is extremely significant that we all need to think about. It's not meant for anything other than what's going on. So we've talked about habitat and the lack thereof. We've talked about CWD, and we've talked a little bit about glyphosate. When the Game Commission blames issues on habitat or what have you. Or they say farmers, with I think the misguided Farm Bureau, wants to interject crop damage as if it's this serious thing that just happened. Since the Garden of Eden, by the way, there was animals and food, just in case you forgot. So think about this. They're now proposing, the Game Commission that is, to come into certain people's area and teach them how to make food plots. Why is the Game Commission talking about food plots when that's their job on their land, not private? Then they say, oh, the deer came, here's D-maps, kill them. Does that make sense to you?
The Game Commission land up on a hazard road, there's 9 fields. There's nothing growing in those fields. They don't plant them. There's a little bit of clover in a few of the fields. That's it. They haven't planted those fields in at least 5 years.
That's
Whether
it's a
because
perennial.
of loss of equipment, loss of money, whatever, they don't plant those fields. So they have the fields to plant, and they don't do it.
Right. So again, I just say to you, it's a serious conflict to me. I know the Farm Bureau doesn't like it when I bring up the fact that farmers can collect crop damage, but in fact, let the farmers be farmers, let the Game Commission be game managers, and let's just stay in our lane. Let's face it, food plotting is a multi-billion-dollar nationwide industry. We actually, as private landowners, are making the wildlife healthier, and we're feeding them. But it's also a magnet. There's only 2 things that drive wildlife. 2 things. Their belly and reproduction. That's it. So they will work their way around both of them as to how they can get that done. They will lay in a fence row all day long and come out at night. We all know that the rut brings Stupidville out. And they get a little bit beside themselves and do things that they wouldn't otherwise do, right? So we get a little bit different opportunity. But at the end of the day, folks, we all know that this isn't rocket science, okay? But if baiting is illegal, what's a food plot? Right? So I think we have to have a little bit of a balance here, and we have to understand that we should manage in the way in which we should manage, and we should stay. Look, I think it's offensive for anybody to say that my Sportsman's money should go into putting a fence around your farm. That doesn't make sense to me. I think it's completely inappropriate, and we're going to pick winners and losers, and then there you go. So you put food plots in, teach people to put food plots in, and then say, hey, by the way, the deer came, success, kill them. I think we got some mixed messages here, and I think we need to understand we need changes, we need true leadership. Don't forget to call the governor. I think I got that message across tonight. He needs phone calls.
We'd like to invite Scott Myers Jr. You got quite a few boxes checked here.
So yes, I want to thank you for coming. Thank you, Joe, for also putting this on. So I am a county commissioner here in Sullivan County, so part of Joe's district. Couple concerns that I have to do with fishing. So I've recently seen, and I know this is obviously something you don't have a direct ability to impact, but I know you both can be a very loud voice in the room, is our native brook trout. My county is loaded with beautiful, beautiful streams, and I get very frustrated when I am fishing in the Loyalsock Creek or in the Muncie Creek, and I pull out a rainbow trout, missing a fin over here, pale as can be. There is no reason those should ever be stocked in some of our beautiful Class A wild trout streams. And I just want to throw that kind of plug in here tonight to both of you to please keep fighting on those issues, because we have a beautiful state fish and it needs to keep its habitat. We can't have these invasive North Carolina, Bellefonte, whatever, wherever they're coming from, fish going in our streams.
I appreciate that. I can't say that I can speak with a lot of passion or even experience when it comes to that. I'm aware of the issue. But I also know that there, as I said before, without certain stockings, we wouldn't have anything. And there's probably an argument to be made that they have a short lifespan. So it will be short-lived compared to the brookies. But on a positive note, today, as I helped empty a whole truck, I didn't see any. So it's like Browns.
Good.
I didn't see any rainbows. Actually, there wasn't even a golden. I asked early on, in the whole truck there wasn't even a golden. 22,000 fish. So I do think there is a point of your concern that geography-wise, they do know that some areas it's okay or better to put them in other areas. So good point.
They've been encroaching on it, and that's why I just want you guys to keep up that good fight. One more thing, and I'm going to mention this gentleman here, if I'm not mistaken. Was it Larry? Yeah. So one of Larry's points, ADA accessibility to fishing. So right now in Sullivan County, we have a handful of different projects that we're kind of exploring, and I want to, again, put it to some of our legislators that funding is critical, because a very small county like Sullivan County, we don't have the funds to be able to go throw in handicap accessible fishing locations everywhere, but we have the beautiful water to do it. So we have a large portion of our population are veterans. You know, I think when people come back, you know, from war, they maybe can't, you know, fish like they used to. They can't run a stream. It's great to have some of these locations.
There are specific grant programs for that. I've spoken to them extensively about it. And again, I will tell people that even though some folks may have a resistance to some of the protocol, almost every piece of protocol that I have come across, there must be public access. So in other words, you can't have fishermen's resources go into your private pond and nobody else can come there. So it's a good point, because you're talking about the county and you're talking about ADA specific. So there are things that we can look into and help you with that, because it is available.
Yep. So I just want to thank you again for coming out, and like I said, wanted to bend your ear a little bit on those couple issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody. I really mean it. If there's anything that comes up that you have questions about or need to know, or please get on that video, watch that video in its entirety. It's really not, I found it to be, I couldn't get away from it. So it's information that you don't normally see, and I think if you share it, and if you call the governor and let him know what you think, it would be helpful. Thanks again, Rep. Ham. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
No, is that everyone? Any other questions?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sure. Go to that mic and.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. My name is Mike Clementoni. I live right here local. Two quick questions, probably one based on what I've heard tonight I don't think you can answer. We live in CWD area 7, I think it is, right here. I think we're right in the central part of it. According to the Game Commission's website, since they started testing, they've tested 2,293 specimens for CWDs. Anybody here know how many tested positive? 0.
The only reason we're in that is because of a
Deer farm. I was going to say, why are we still in it, and how do we get out of it? And you probably can't answer that. Right?
So,
we have to be clear for 0 for 10 years.
yeah, I will tell you that there, I think it's 5. I would tell you that I think what bothers me about that specific is, if you had a positive in a private concealed area, that should not impact a greater number or a greater area.
Say the deer got out, though?
No,
That's what I heard, was that the deer actually got out.
they had one that was sniff each other through a fence. So the possibility of getting out.
So that's a problem for me. But since I know that, because it's hard to keep track of some of the specifics with all the different regions, let me ask you this. What do you see as a problem as your area being identified as that?
The higher number of antlerless licenses. As
Which
well
I'm not
as-
so sure you're going to stop anyway, as we heard tonight.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I said I don't think there's an answer for it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring
It is
up
a
as
problem. I do believe it's an
comment.
excuse. I believe it's an excuse to just do more and more of this.
Yeah.
Legally, I have a friend that comes up from down near Reading. He shoots a deer. We have to process it and take the meat home. He cannot put the whole deer in the back of his truck to go home.
Oh, I know how that goes. Believe me, there's a whole process that I was instrumental in getting as a protocol for all the butchers shops in all of Pennsylvania because of that. I can even tell you exactly where that took place and how it happened, but that's for another day. But I will also tell you, I challenged this in an open meeting for this reason. There's nothing to say that if you did have a CWD infected deer, that it didn't get taken anywhere. I mean, that's like impossible to stop. You could say that's the rules, but at the end of the day, you know, you can't stop that unless you know specifically. I'm going to tell you what happened to me in Missouri. So in Missouri, you had two lines. This is CWD check for every deer that was shot. When you came in, they asked you one question. Are you going to mount it? Yes. Okay, you can go. Think about that.
That's obvious. If it's going to mount it, it doesn't have CWD.
There you go. You're so smart. So that's how they did it. If you said, no, I'm not going to mount this deer, they said, okay, move over there. We're going to test it. But anything that was going to be mounted, it went wherever. Drove it all the way across the country. So, look, it's a problem. The only thing I can say is we can request the specific area as to why so severe. Do you guys know, and I could ask somebody, but I don't want to do that. Do you guys know what else may have happened on that location? Like were more than one deer killed? You don't know? Okay. That was it. You know that. Okay.
I don't know that.
All right. Yeah, it always is. As soon as you identify it, you say, okay, kill more deer.
Yeah. Second question.
Yeah.
I'm old. I used a cell phone or a cell camera. I used a deer camera. When you put a roll of film in it, you sent it away, you got it back, and you had 12 pictures of deer that were on your camera. Graduated to the ones with the discs in it. That's great. You go out every couple weeks, you take them out. Now people use their cell phones. I struggle to run the television, let alone get pictures on a cell phone, so I don't have cell phone cameras. But I read an article this fall of some individual who shot a state record deer. I don't know if it was in Ohio, Iowa. Guy was on a farm, he was baling hay, got an alert, the big buck he was after went out into the field, he stopped farming, his dad came and did the farming, he went out and he shot the deer. Did a big story on it. First of all, I never would have admitted something like that. And now I hear the possibility of drones for deer recovery, and I know some states have banned cameras, deer cameras in the woods. Is Pennsylvania, and I'm not advocating one way or the other, is Pennsylvania taking any measures toward electronic aiding?
So, you know that's actually in Title 34.
I did not.
That you cannot use electronics to aid your pursuing of game. I forget the exact verbiage, but that's actually in there, which actually means you can't go. buck on its way, Bob.
Right. That's always been that.
16 deer coming your way
Turkeys on the
in
way.
1992.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So there is that. What I don't think is correct is for anybody to put a game camera on public property. There's a serious intrusion of privacy when you do that. Because even in a court of law, there's certain things that are not permissible. If you have your property, you put up 100 cameras in 1 acre, that's your business. You still could get challenged if that picture takes a photo of somebody off your line. There's still an issue there, which is why I also think the whole thing with drones is a problem. First and foremost, you don't know that that game has expired. To put a drone in the air and say you're going to recover game, you don't know that it's gone. You don't know that it's dead. And whose property are you on? And so there are issues with it. The one that came up before was somebody's personal camera on state land. And I don't actually have an answer for that yet again, but we're gonna put that out there again, because I do believe if you haven't seen some of the stuff that has happened, the Game Commission has actually used the open fields doctrine to put game cameras on private property to surveil people. I think that's going to the Supreme Court in PA. That's a problem. We have legislation to try to, I guarantee you if I was the chair, I would be running that legislation immediately. I think it's a tremendous invasion of privacy. It was started because of the prohibition with stills. That's how far back that doctrine goes, okay? But on the drone issue, as you have probably read, the Game Commission really seemed to muddy the waters again by a man who called up and asked if it was permissible to use a drone to recover game. And this is the answer he got. Only on private property, not state property. So he said, oh, okay. He received a call sometime later if he could provide his services to recover game.
Just to clarify, you can't use a drone on state property or private property.
I know that, but that's what they told him. That's why I'm saying it. That's what they told him.
Game Commission?
That's correct. That's what they told him. So when I heard the story when it first came out, I immediately said, why would they tell them that it's permissible when it's not? So here's the rest of the story. When that man got the call, if he could use his services to recover game, he went and did it. And he got stung, and it was the Game Commission that set him up. So the Game Commission took his call, then his name and his number, then called him and set him up. And he thought he was coming to do a duty or a service that was really already illegal. And when he did, the Game Commission nabbed him. So he took him to court. And twice they tried to subpoena the records of that man calling the Game Commission and asking if he could get that permission if it was legal. They said, we don't have that record. But when they got to Common Pleas Court, I believe it was, suddenly an envelope showed up and said, yeah, we have the recording in here. We just don't know how to listen to it. Okay? The judge was so incensed, they threw the thing out and said, case dismissed. And that's clearly entrapment and a violation of the Brady Law where they did not share the information with the defendant. So the reason that's appropriate right now in the discussion is because of what you're bringing up about electronics. Not only the drone, but cameras in general. Okay? I have cameras. To be honest with you, I think you hit the nail on the head. Probably should have never admitted to what he did. No. But the fact of the matter is, that's not fair chase. Mm-hmm. Come on now. That really, if you think about it, That's no different than having a drone in the air.
Right.
Let that drone circle your property. Oh, that buck's here. Here I go on my ATV, and out there I set myself up. That's not fair chase in the practice of fair chase. So that's why it's a good question as to what you're bringing up, because electronics in general went from walkie-talkies. Do you guys remember when the Game Commission was listening in on two-way walkie-talkies?
Mm-hmm.
They were listening on channels.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying, oh, they're close enough. We can zero in on these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went to cell phones. Then it was anybody's guess what was next. So it's a good question. I do think it's a problem. We actually talked about drones in the House several years ago because you have that issue with, if this is your property lines, where does your property line end going up? Technically, Pennsylvania, it doesn't end going down until you hit a Chinaman. But going up, there was never any specifics to where we got into, I think, what was FAA 500-foot ceiling. And then if you remember when it came up last fall in New Jersey, and they're over at my place. I actually have a picture of one. You probably get a kick out of it, taking a picture of my grandson with a deer, and my American flag and the POW flag is in the background. The full moon is rising, and right off to the side is a red drone. And so a lot of the discussion came. You even remember there was an elected official in New Jersey that said shoot them down, because it becomes sort of a invasion of the unknown, because you don't know what that is, or you feel like you don't have your privacy. So I think it's a bigger discussion that's going to go forward, where you could probably make an argument this way. But look, we legalized bloodhounds so that if you have a dog that can track a down animal, you can go recover it. Here's something else that most hunters
Dog
don't.
has to remain on a leash, right?
Yes. And here's something that most hunters do not know. It has always been illegal to go recover game after dark.
Yeah.
And a lot of hunters have felt necessary to go pursue that animal with a flashlight to go get it. I understand it, but it was never legal.
I didn't know that.
So anyway, good discussion.
All right. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks again, guys. I appreciate it. If there's any way I can help, if there's anything I can do, I appreciate everything with this fire company and what they did and how they opened up the facility. And don't forget, our first responders, I actually created that day in Pennsylvania, if you don't know it. First Responder Day in Pennsylvania is September 27th, because they're the first ones that answer the call when you need them. So thanks again.